Welcome back to the Hishaku Hideout, a weekly podcast where we talk about the latest chapter and everything Kagurabachi. I'm here with Dice.
Yo, yo.
And today we're getting into chapter 76. Now, before I get your opinion or we start talking about the beginning of the chapter, might I just say, fucking Samura. You just had to die this chapter, bro. Fuck. So it looks like my whole Samura dies in 5 chapters. I wasn't cooking shit. All right, let me just start by saying that, and I'm a little pissed, but we'll get into that later. What did you think of the chapter?
Say Hokazono really faked you out, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah, playing with my emotions. I was like, yeah, take that.
What a chapter, dude. It's just my immediate thoughts, really, what a chapter. Obviously I'm big on Hirohiko, and we got a lot of him this chapter. We got a lot of Kumayuri, play. I think we were talking, or not I think, we were talking before we started recording that I love how much the geisha Shikigami from Hirohiko's Kumayuri remind me of Chihiro's goldfish, and just a bit of the creativity and the visual aspect, how it kind of is similar to Chihiro's goldfish. I really like that.
Yeah, we talked a bit about it before we started recording, and there's that one specific panel of them, or them in the Oran or the geisha, whatever they are, in between the panels flying around, when they're circling the hotel, and just it kind of seems how Chihiro's fish looks, just how it kind of tails off and all that, which I think does it does lend itself to all the connections and parallels we made of Hirohiko to Chihiro since they were introduced to each other. It's they're running mates, and it's very telling, just looking at the beginning of this chapter where Hirohiko's pissed because Chihiro is holding himself back for the real fight against Samura, and that he's like, well, fuck, I guess I'm gonna have to just get rid of Samura first.
Yeah, he's so cold for that, just that mindset. Like you said, the fact that he's just because Chihiro isn't willing to go all out, he's like, okay, so I'm gonna have to kind of get rid of this guy just so you can kind of get serious. Bet. And it just it goes back to what we saw from him and that little play again screen, because he even recalls he recalls how Chihiro already beat him twice, and why Chihiro would kind of underestimate him, so to speak, or kind of not give him, just pretty much underestimate him, and he really thinks of that and reflects, and I really like how that really encourages him to just go out Samura so he could get Chihiro at his best. And it's it's worth respecting, really. He doesn't want, he wouldn't take advantage of Chihiro not going all out, to target and get that dub, no, he wants him at his best.
And
so he gets points.
Yeah, and I think that's partially, that's also in and of itself the reason why Hirohiko always loses, is because he interjects himself instead of I mean, it's to his character, right? It makes sense in character and all that, but instead of trying to insert himself into this, I mean, I guess he has to because he's Shaku, but basically just saying pick your battles type of thing. Chihiro wouldn't accept it, he put himself in a position that Hirohiko's in, you know what I mean? Hirohiko wants to fight Chihiro at his all, but he's in a position where he has to eliminate he has to eliminate others or remove obstacles just to get Chihiro to fight him. But the thing is, Chihiro is above him in the sense, in terms of fighting. So he's in a position where he wants to fight him at his fullest, and not saying that he has a chance, but Chihiro's he needs to fight Chihiro as well with his 100%, he can't have his focus divided. And I think that's why he's down on he's down in the count on like matches, because he's every time he fights Chihiro, there's a plan he needs to wait for, or they're trying to do like with getting the enchanted blades, and he's completed his objectives, to be fair. Like, he's still doing his thing, but just in terms of like the win-loss record, that's why he's losing, to Chihiro, because Chihiro, he can, I guess Chihiro is holding back now, but this scenario is a little different because now there's 3 enchanted blades happening. But like before, he's diverting his attention, thinking what he had, like everything he has at his disposal is enough to deal with it. But we've proven time and time again, and by the end of this by the way the end of this chapter looks, it looks like he's not like making moves like 100% in one direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you definitely have a point, and I think it's a big reason why he doesn't like target Samura head on as well, right? Because he's like, it's interesting how he's willing to kind of honor Chihiro or respect him in the sense of like wanting that, head-to-head match him be pretty much an even. But with Samura, he's like straight up just willing to sneak him just to get him out of the picture. And I think that just speaks to like his infatuation with Chihiro specifically.
That's
like
a good
this
point.
isn't like a code of honor or anything like that, and it's, once again, I think it reflects Chihiro because, you got me thinking like Chihiro is also the type, like, yeah, he has a code, but when he knows he's going at scum, like he calls his enemies, he doesn't give them the chance to like, oh, okay, they have to be on even footing. Like no, he cuts them down the first chance he can get, whether it looks dirty or not, because they're scum. And like we've seen before, like he doesn't care to be kind of like the decent hero or whatever. Like he's just on a mission. And I think, in this chapter, whether it's like more obvious with like, we talked about earlier, kind of like Hirohiko's Kumayuri, Shikigami, or like a bit more subliminally or subtly with like kind of like their ideals and their codes. I think this chapter we see even like more similarities between Chihiro and Hirohiko. And I really like how it's executed.
Yeah, and we see, I guess it's kind of Hirohiko developing as a fighter. Like I felt like he was just fighting for the his squad, like whatever Yura told him to do, basically. You know what I mean? He never saw it as fun, or like he even says like we don't get to have any fun. But like Chihiro's like the first obstacle that he's been faced with that he doesn't. It's not about the kill. It's about the engagement of like Chihiro. Like he says like, oh, me and you are, we understand each other, and he has this like this connection to Chihiro because they're both, like they talk about the killing and all this, that, and the other, like, and they're both of the same age, but just how like we're seeing Hirohiko's development. I like, to your point, him thinking to himself, like how he's gonna deal with Samura. Like he's kind of like that, like the aggravating little brother, that's like not far off from the others, but he's just like he can't beat Chihiro 100%, and he can't beat Samura 100%. And now we're in this shit show of a dilemma. But now with his enchanted blade and his the battle experience he's occurred through his defeating the manager in his 150 years Reagan sword style, to also like clashing with Chihiro and picking up his AI White Purity style to some degree. He's starting to, I think, like, and maybe it's been there and I'm just not remembering it, which very well could be, but like his like inner monologue as he's battling Chihiro seems to kind of also be developing. you know, like he's more not methodical, because he's still kind of like a loose cannon. Like, you never know what he will do, but he is a bit more structured in his thinking about how he goes about things. Like, even the air he gives off when he talks to Toto about he's like, that decides it. It just plain outright says, that decides it. I'm gonna kill Samura first, which is a tall order, and he just comes out and says that. And it's shot, you know, she's like, what? But he's like, you know, it seems like he's a bit more stoic, a bit more like mature. He says, I want you here to fight me for real. What did Yura say? And, you know, he's like reminding her that like he's the boss essentially. And it does feel he kind of like panel presence wise, he feels more mature in that panel than like how he was, you know, last chapter with the video game analogy.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think a lot of what we're seeing here is like Hirohiko and like, and I might just be reading too much into it, but like the way I see it is like Hirohiko's right now in his like ideal environment, which is kind of crazy to say when you like consider the fact that he's literally running off pure bloodlust right now, because he got hit with a real heavy blow by Chihiro, right? And he's still injured, and we see it. And like what's driving him is literally like his desire to go at Chihiro. And even then, like once again, emphasizing the point, like he's already down 2-0, he's injured right now, and he still wants Chihiro at his best, which is like I just like, it really just hit me like again, and like that's just insane. But I think, well, what have we seen from Hirohiko before? We've seen like he has like essentially like a freestyle. He improvises. He goes off instinct. Right now, that's literally all he can do. So I think what we're seeing from him is literally like him in his ideal environment, because he's pushed to a corner and is in a situation where like the only thing he can do is like be himself.
Survive.
And I think once again, yeah, and I think that's why Yura gives him that reign. I don't think it's a coincidence that Yura gives him the green light to do what he wants. I think Yura's very aware, like you said, he's been groomed, whether it's to go at Chihiro directly or not, but he's been groomed as kind of like this weapon for the Hishaku, the one kind of like wild card. And I'm always kind of like on and off about like whether Hokuzona's about to kill him like the next chapter, or Hirohiko's gonna be like around for another 50 chapters, because it's he you know, Hokuzona's really playing with my emotions like that. But I think what we see from him this chapter is just that, man. It's like, despite the injury, despite the fact that he's still like very much a rookie when it comes to like wielding an enchanted blade, he is once again in his ideal environment to really thrive and, like you said, just grow exponentially. Right? Like, to me, this is better for him than any sort of training, any sort of sparring, any sort of other type of combat. Like, right now, he's at his, like, where he has to be to just grow.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Like, just thinking about, like, his ideal environment for him to thrive is, like, chaos with his back against the wall, where he has to be forced to like fight for his survival, in a sense, like for him to his full capabilities. And you know that it's like he needs that like push to like
he was compared to a wild animal previously. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Just wanted to like bring that up because I think that really like hammers that point home. So
yeah, no, 100%, you're right. Like, and so it does, like, I could see why Yura gives him so much like you know, freedom off the leash than say maybe some of the other members have. And it's mostly because in order for Hirohiko to go to his fullest, he has to be like playing for keeps, you know what I mean?
Oh,
like
yeah.
he can't be doing no mundane bullshit. Like he has to in order for him to level up, it has to be his back, you know, he has to be at like his back against the wall with, you know, not looking good for him, because he's going to rise to that challenge. And that's why he has faith, like, yeah, you know, if, you know, like, you can kill Samura, just make sure you get Tobimune. which is a crazy statement. You know what I mean? Because it's like, even like we see Chihiro's like respect and adoration for like Samura, still saying he's the master of like, and rightfully so. But we'll get to that because there's other things I want to say about that.
Yeah.
We do see that the second ability of Kumayuri is play, which essentially allows him to freely control the objects around him, and which is perfectly to like his like student of freedom. Like it says, he can freely control these objects. Like he's not tied to these beliefs to respect the dead, or there's none of that. He will use any and everything. And it's interesting, it says control objects around them. Like we only see him doing it with like the dead bodies, but it says objects. So like we don't know if there's like maybe like a random like little one of the fodder enemies had a sword on him. It says control objects. He could have a sword flying in the air somewhere, getting ready to like take somebody out, like, what I mean? Just control that to stab somebody from the back. Like it's capable of doing so much. It's a broken ability, especially when you can make his enemies hallucinate with a banquet. It's crazy.
Yeah, that 2-for-1 special is fucking broken. And yeah, bro, like that play ability is essentially like telekinesis. Like it's just like the ability to move things with your mind. Obviously, he has to use the kind of like spirit Shikigami here, but it, like you said, it's really fucking broken, and
it's
that's
like
why
an
I said
extension
earlier,
of them too. So I don't think it's like you don't have to.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an innate feel. Like it just feels like second nature to them once you master it, and that's why like Chihiro is so impressed. Like he's mastering the blade already. He was like surprised at his usage of it.
Yeah.
He calls him a freak.
Yeah, I mean, I want. Let's get into Samura because I'm not like I'll stay glazing Hirohiko like all episode really because.
One thing I do want to mention about Hirohiko, is you did talk and you did mention about like the blow that Chihiro gave Hirohiko like 3 chapters ago or whatever it was. Well, actually, it was even before the flashback. Caught a sword in the torso.
Mm-hmm.
Caught
nasty,
with
disrespectful.
Like we see him grabbing like presumably like the damaged area, like right by his heart. And he's spitting up blood. Like this don't look good for like Hirohiko one bit. But is it weird that I still think Hirohiko, like I think I'm starting to. I don't know where I sit on if Hirohiko makes it out of this arc. Samura's still gonna die this arc, but I don't know if Hirohiko is gonna die. That's just one thing I've been thinking about, like not sure how I feel, because like that panel of him spitting up blood, plus he's going up against 2 enchanted blades, just don't look good for him. But my bad. We could get into Samura.
Yeah, no, I say like we can definitely get into more Hirohiko and like where we go from here, like later in theories.
Yeah.
But we can like transition from Hirohiko because we know like Hirohiko specifically says that, we mentioned earlier that he uses the bodies to kind of go at Samura. But not only that, he specifically like mentions going at Samura's psyche. So like you said, like the banquet kind of part of the 2-for-1 special, it plays a big part in him being able to subdue or thinking he's able to subdue Samura, right? So like to your credit, what you said earlier, like we see Hirohiko like really thinking things through a bit more methodically so he can really, get what he wants. And Samura's really kind of pushed to, speaking about kind of pushed into a corner, Samura's pushed into a corner here.
Yeah, and it's a corner that he is like someone of his ability, which he said he was like the fastest sword skill in the war. Like this is that was true before the Enchanted Blade, and it's ever so true after, he got the Enchanted Blade. Like, Samura is well respected, and as a fighter, like, I mean, we saw him fight the Hatshaku and all, like, the fodder that they brought with him. Datanseki infused, like, fighters, by the way. And he's, like, not sweating, really. He's just, like, getting hyped. Like, he's just doing his thing. But Hirohiko's, like, attacking him in the sense of, like, mixing these hallucinations and, like, playing on that psyche. And as we see him in the, like, he just keeps getting this mental imagery of his daughter getting bullied, her feet dangling, and because of what unaliving herself because of who her father is, and that's all he's thinking about while he's trying to fight all these people. And eventually it's just to the point where the hallucinations, like, are just too much, and they overwhelm him to where he's back in his own hallway of his old home, back outside of Yuri's door, and we even see his, like, outfit change. Like, in the one panel, he doesn't even, like, have his coat on like he does in the panel above it. It's like that real for him, but then these guys basically just pop out of the door, or as it, I mean, he can't see it anyway, but as it looks to us, but it's like that, they just kind of pop out the hallucination and, stab him. But I like to think at least, Samura did, protect Yuri. Maybe he only did that because he knew the third ability. He still has that third ability, but who knows? I'm just giving him a hard time. I do like the fact that Yuri got to see her father, like, risk, put his life on the line for her, though.
Yeah, man. I think it's very nice. Like, I think it's a nice touch how, like, you mentioned those panels where we see her, like, cleaning up the graffiti and, like, her feet. I do like how Hokuzono's able to, like, display it in terms of, like, Samura's kind of trying to cut through those visions as he's kind of cutting those people down. But like you said, essentially it kind of becomes like a reality, right? Like, the hallucination just takes over until those bodies just pop out. And yeah, man, it's interesting because he was able to kind of, like you said, put down the Datanseki infused henchman, but that banquet effect here kind of makes the difference with just kind of like manipulated corpses. Even though I'm of the mind that Samura kind of plays into Hirohiko's hand here, like, I don't think he was and we might never get a definite answer, but I don't think he was caught and then kind of forced to do what we see, in that last panel. I think he, kind of triggered that, knowing that, like, whatever it is, I think essentially he put himself in that situation to kind of trick Hirohiko. I might be wrong, but I don't know. It does kind of make, I think we talked about this before we started recording. Not sure I mentioned it in the episode, but he literally hits Hirohiko back with the same move that Hirohiko hit him with, in terms of, like, faking out his death. So yeah, I thought that was a nice touch as well.
Yeah, you thought you had me. They had me in the first half, but
Psych.
And one thing I wanted to say with Samura, with him, and like, he's been getting, like, kind of hit. Like, he's been kind of getting hit, like, from the fan base. Like, he has some, like, people who really hate him. Then there's people who, like, really love him. But like, he is kind of a tough character to kind of pinpoint, because you can kind of give him, like, the benefit of the doubt on either side. Like, I see him as a good character. I don't necessarily, like, root for him or, like, want him to, like, live, just to be real. But, like, as a written character, like, I say he's good. He's solid now. And how, personal feelings aside or whatever, like, I think that I hope the fan base does kind of, like, all agree, and it does seem like that's the consensus. I don't know. I think that I still think he's gonna die in this arc, though. You know, I just have that feeling that like this is Hokuzono playing with us. Like even though he does have that third ability that he used, this is like, because I mean, let's face it, Hirohiko still has a third ability. You know what? I'm kind of getting ahead of myself talking about like Samura, dying or how it's gonna go. Before we get to that point, let's talk about Kaguri because he's still, in the vicinity, just lurking.
Yeah, I mean, he finally shows up, right? You've been you've been bringing him up for a minute, kind of asking where he is. I had even kind of suggested the idea that we might see him pop with like a big moment, kind of taking out a Mazumi member or something. But no, all he did was just get the fuck out of there once Hirohiko unleashed Banquet, or like not get out of there really, but he did kind of just like dip, really, right?
I think it shows he's smart. It's like because he knows like Hirohiko pulled his. There's 3 enchanted blades. There's no way he can survive up there because he's the odd man out, honestly, because Hirohiko's not going to defend him. Like Iori and those other guys, they have good guys on their side who will, protect them. Hirohiko is not going to like prioritize Kaguri's, well-being. You know what I mean? Hirohiko's just going to do his thing.
Yeah, so he's just, I mean, it doesn't look like he left. He's just kind of holding out, see what plays out.
And I still think he's going to get a body, though, because, I mean, he's
interesting.
He might be there for, like, after the Enchanted Blade battle goes on, because who's going to be able to, like, fight him if everyone's, like, injured? Or if, like, all 3 of the Enchanted Blade wielders that are currently there, like if they're all beat up or like all on death's door, or whoever's like still standing is not going to be in the condition to be able to go a full fight against Kaguri. I think that's fair to say, because we see how like Chihiro looks after every like long drawn out battle. He's always waking up after like some X amount of days.
Yeah, bro always gets put to sleep.
I don't know, maybe what's that, Ikura, the Iori's class mate? Maybe Ikura.
Cosplayer?
Yeah, cosplayer Ikura. Maybe he'll step up and he'll live up to his true potential.
He'll take on Kaguri.
Yeah. He'll have like the flame bone type sword. But no, I mean, we'll just have to see what's up with Kaguri though. I mean, he is lurking in the area. We could tell by like the architecture that he's around. I think this just shows his like pedigree of a fighter, just knowing
not a dumbass.
Yeah, what fight to fight.
Yeah, he picks his battles well.
And like seeing how when Samura got stabbed protecting Iori, like everything Samura has done, and the things he's done things that are disagreeable and all that, but we see like like Mr. Samura still having the respect for him, to like they care about like that dude's life. Like they don't, I guess they think that they can still redeem him in a sense, or like try to like sway him back to off of his hell-bent mission. But like going into this hotel, and it'd be silly for them to think that, or maybe they just didn't think Samura was going to pop up at all. Maybe, they thought it was going to basically redo the seal, and that, I know that was the objective before, but at a certain point, it, had to have come across to them like, oh, like Chihiro knew, because he even brings it up to Yori, that means your father's memories must have came back too. So, like, if he goes there, it's like either Chihiro's going to die or Samura's going to die. That was my thought of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
Like, they care for him, but what... I don't know.
No, I mean, I think that's the big question, right? Because I think the big thing here at the end of this chapter is that we see... And like I was doing my best Samura impression because you had to tell me this. I didn't realize upon my first read through of the chapter. But Samura heals his eyes, and we get that thought from Yuri, where she says heal, and we see kind of like the text box that says like his wounds are the fuel of his flame, which I think is just essentially kind of a neat metaphor for like how his pain is what kind of keeps him going.
Okay.
Even without the, there might be something more there, right? Like, that could kind of play to the Suzaku ability or whatever. But, considering that we see him kind of heal himself, which I think is part of that Suzaku ability, I think that's just a nice play on that. Even without his memories, kind of like, what do we know about Samura's mission? It's kind of like his guilt regarding what he did during the war, right? And that's his whole, like, how that impacted his daughter aside, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, what you kind of talked about earlier and just kind of brought up, like, it all begs the question is like, where do we go from here? Like, are we going to get that 2v1 that I've been talking about since forever, it feels like? Because it doesn't feel like it anymore in terms of like Chihiro and Hirohiko kind of like reluctantly teaming up in order to take down the bigger bad, which, had already stated that any enchanted blade that goes off, he's cutting them down. To your credit, like, or the question that you pose, and I'm, right with you, is that's like, have the circumstances changed? Like, is he just gonna go at Hirohiko now and he's willing to sit down with Chihiro and have a little chat, or are they gonna fight after he, hypothetically goes at Hirohiko? Like, I don't know, what's the logical kind of prediction, if that makes sense, in terms of like,
yeah, no,
I don't even know what to think. Where do we go from here? Because to a degree, like, the most logical kind of, to me, I still think it's most logical that Hirohiko and Chihiro reluctantly team up to take down Samura. I just think it's how I see kind of like the key pieces on the board moving and how big players can be removed in order for the story to proceed. But at face value, it doesn't really look like Chihiro and Hirohiko are on any terms to kind of form a little pack. So I don't know, man. I'm just rambling at this point, but I got a lot of questions like you on my mind in terms of what's next. And once again, a testament to how Hokuzono's really been able to take advantage of the weekly experience, which I believe is one of the things you really gave him lots of credit on.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think he excels as the weekly reading experience to keep the engagement up, like the allure, the interest, the intrigue behind the characters. And like Samura's like ability, the Suzaku, which there's a Yu Yu Hakusho villain named Suzaku, but the
Gyasu's right hand as well. What is the character's name?
Yeah, Suzaku. That's don't invite him to a smoke sesh type of guy. But Samura, like, he must have like wounded himself with Tobimune, and so if he ever had to heal his eyes, he could, or and I guess he would. The only time he would do that was like a killing, if he was like took a fatal like wound. So we see like he uses the Suzaku ability, and he kind of does like what Chihiro does to Hirohiko at the theater, in a sense. Like, he's just overwhelming him with like these crows, like covering the entire area with crows.
With aura,
overwhelming him
with aura.
That's basically right. But like, now he doesn't need the crows to see anymore. You know what I mean? So he can just use the crows to like he can still swap places with them though. So I'm guessing that sense that like, if he just like eliminates all the lights, plus with his like senses, and like, he's so used to fighting in the dark. So like, even though he has his eyes, he doesn't necessarily mean he needs to use them. But I think it does play into the fact of, because he didn't have his vision, that we see Hirohiko mentioned, like, he says, Yura says that, was it the exact quote? Something about like his heart takes it like, it's 2 times harder on Samura. Oh, his heart.
Yeah, like
Yeah, his heart is
he's
twice as
sensitive.
sensitive. So like,
Yeah.
this might be the only enchanted blade that Samura might be weak against. Like the Kumayuri might be like the foil to his power, or to his like moveset essentially. And now that he kind of removed that restriction of like his heart being like, or maybe his heart is twice as sensitive because of his own psyche, like of his guilt. I mean, it could also play into that, but I do think that him being blind, like, it makes it your other sense rage, heightens the other sense, all that. So I think like Banquet did have like a big effect on him, because he, might have had a bigger effect on him because he's blind as well. So like that audible genjutsu essentially like fucked with him heavier. And, that's what kind of took him out against like the father.
That's interesting.
But now he doesn't have that restriction. But I could see like it, next chapter where Chihiro, maybe he just starts spreading his fishes, and like that's how he protects himself. It'll be it'll be like the Miami Dolphins and like Philadelphia Eagles, like the birds and the fish, even though they're not fish.
We'll finally get the big goldfish we've been talking about.
Yeah, oh yeah, mega fish. But like Hirohiko doesn't have an ability to like shield himself from like what's about to happen. Like Chihiro can he can create a bunch of little fish to like kind of combat like this getting barraged by all these like feathers or like crows. And not that like they're actually gonna fight or whatever, but mostly to give him like like some kind of safe space, you know what I mean? But like Hirohiko, all the corpses are have been cut down now. Like it's not like he can just have like, I mean, I guess he can create new ones, but they have to get there. They have to get there first. Like,
I mean, he can just move the fucking limbs if he wants, really.
True. I guess it depends, like where because he still has a third ability, and I think that third ability is going to come in clutch. But one thing that I just like hearing you say your part, like I kind of thought of it. The Kaguri's job might be to just capture Iori if this ever happens, and then that's how they get rid of Samura. Basically, Kaguri just has
deadlock.
Yeah, like if I sense, like if I see a feather, I'm just gonna kill her. You know what I mean? Like if I see one feather drop from the sky, motherfucker, I'm slashing.
Yeah, like, or take her hostage, because like now Samura's pulled up. I think that changes things a bit. Like if they just kill her, Samura could just go crazy.
Yeah, so that's what I meant. Like they're gonna use a hostage, and Kaguri's like a bright enough swordsman to know, like if I see a feather, that means you can like teleport to me. Like just saying if he sees a feather, he's just gonna kill her to like warn him not to use his power, or he's gonna hurt her. Because he doesn't just like instant teleport. He has to swap places with the feather.
But you're talking about Samura.
Yeah. I'm just talking about like down the line, like in a chapter or two, like,
I don't think Samura's gonna go at Kaguri right now. Like I don't think.
Oh no, I meant Kaguri bring Iori to them. Like not exactly like right next chapter, but depending on how the battle goes, there might be a situation where Kaguri does like interrupt the battle with a hostage, having Iori as a hostage.
Yeah, so like that's what I think it will like. We could potentially either see that or just go into a fight. I could also see like this being a huge fake out and we don't get a fight, because like I talked about a bit earlier, like I have a bit trouble of thinking of like what matchup could really take place here. Like what would be like what makes sense, not just for like the moment right now, but also for the story. Like with the most logical thing in terms of like story wise be like for a deadlock to take place next chapter, where like either Hirohiko with his play ability or Kaguri just kind of sneaks back into the scene. Like, is Yori gonna be taken hostage to kind of get Samura to kind of calm down and, maybe I don't know, like it's just
Yeah,
you bring up a good point with Yori, so
I think that'll definitely like that's more like a like events to come. We also have Yura and Hatshaku above Kaminabi
oh Lord,
headquarters. Like that's like
can't
we
even
could.
talk about
Oh,
him.
1 second, bro. The dog's going crazy. Yeah, that's like events to come. We still have like Yura and Hatshaku above Kaminabi headquarters. Hell, Hokazono can just jump over to that next chapter. We don't know. Hokazono,
True.
he's still a blank canvas in terms of like a specific style. I mean, not saying that like he like is always cutting in and out of like action. Usually he stays with the action, but we didn't expect to get that flashback that long. So it'd be interesting to see. But I do think that I could see next chapter starting with like Chihiro basically spreading his fish to protect himself. Samura showed his whole hand at this point. Now the only thing, Samura with the white purity style, and then he could swap places with the feathers. That's the only abilities he can use now, or as far as we know for the information we have now. But Hirohiko still has a completely unknown ability, and it'll be interesting to see like. Because we'll see that we're gonna get to see that third ability.
Yeah, and now you got me thinking, like, why wouldn't Samura just be able to spam the fuck out of Suzaku? Like, if he just gets hit with another mortal wound, why wouldn't he be able to spam that kind of ability again?
Maybe you can only use it once per. Like maybe it can only use once per person type thing. Like he can't heal Chihiro again. Like he wouldn't be able to use.
Was that stated?
No. It's just headcanon, just a thought.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that would make sense, but also it might just make it so like Samura can only be defeated with his like head chopped off or something. I don't know.
Or take Tobimune away from him, cut his hand off, like to where he can't wield it. Yeah, see, like that ability, like someone like him, like I can't imagine, like that would literally make him the angel of death. Then, like if he could just like spam Suzaku.
Dude, I'd love for it. Like, cause I think somebody had left this in one of our comments, I think was, but of like how they'd like to see Hirohiko kill Samura or something, was it? And like I'm kind of on that same boat. Like it's like even with something like Suzaku or Suzaku, like that headcanon of like him being kind of broken in that sense. Like every time he gets hit with a mortal wound, he can just kind of like spam that ability, and so like ultimately you would have to either take the enchanted blade away or cut off his head. And we've seen Hirohiko's a big fan of cutting heads off, so I don't know, man. I would love to see something like that crazy. Like,
and
I'm lazy Hirohiko.
The last thing I wanted to talk about, the Kumayuri's abilities, like Tobimune's abilities. One, it's basically like a UAV. Like basically just a advanced UAV where he gets these like spirit energy signatures that spike up, and he could just then teleport. He could change places with these like feathers, which allows him like teleportation, and he's a fast swordsman. Plus, he can also heal himself. Like he has like the ultimate move set for someone with advanced sword skill, like a master swordsman already. And then we have Kumayuri, who's like, kind of like a sadistic, like move set, and control the dead, control objects, whatever that may be. We talked about that. Who knows what the third ability can be? If like the third one has to be something that's hacks, or like something that's just gonna like be crazy to think about in concept because of like what the first two. It's like the combo of the first two. I can't imagine how the third one's gonna pair. It's gonna have to be like like the closing of a play, or like the closing of something, I feel like. But it makes me think of Anten's abilities and how like more lackluster or bare bone they are, like just physical lamps, or things like that, a big slash or a bunch of like small condensed, highly condensed small slashes. And I think like the point, I mentioned this to you before we were recording, that Enten's that's the point. Like that's Kunoshige's masterpiece. Yeah, it sure isn't as like glamorous or as like crazy OP as the others. But Chihiro, that's kind of like a hero sword. It's not as destructive as the rest of them are. It's like it's more contained. And someone like Chihiro, with the information of how the other enchanted blades are, and his like potential and all that, it kind of makes sense that Kunoshige would make a blade for his son to kind of almost like reject what the other and 6 blades are, or how they like function as powers. They're too they're just too grandiose. They're too destructive. But Chihiro wields a blade that can be used in public. His blade doesn't seem like an enchanted blade when you think about it, like compared to the rest. Like, people would be able to tell it's an enchanted blade because, most people can kind of like spot it when he uses it, like the manifestation of the fish or whatever. But, what are your thoughts on Anten's abilities?
I think that's a very neat kind of detail that you brought up in terms of like, the big thing being that it's, regard like power scaling aside, it's the one blade that doesn't present a harm or as much of a kind of danger in terms of what's it called, collateral damage, right? So I think that's a very like kind of nice touch that really does align with what we've seen. But I'm not sure I necessarily agree with like kind of your point on like these other blades being a lot more grandiose. I mean, we especially with kind of like what we saw with Samura recently in terms of the wings. Yeah, that definitely kind of like, I don't know. I do think there might be a bit of recency bias because I'm of the mind that like Chihiro's or Enten's rather's abilities might seem a bit more like you said, kind of not as, I'll just use the word again, grandiose, really, like not as big, but they're definitely like, it feels like really practical and really effective in terms of like their usage and their application. And even by themselves, the ability that like, he can replicate, we saw him replicate Flamebone, like to what extent that can be done, I think we still don't know. So I think I do think Enten is broken in itself. It's just, it might not be as flashy. Maybe that's the word. It might not be as flashy. Yeah, but I do think it's just as effective, and it the abilities, AKA Nishiki and Kuro, I think they're all broken in itself. Even like, once again, they're just not flashy. And I think we haven't seen obviously Chihiro tap into the blade's peak power. There's some talk about the true realm at the beginning of this chapter, and so I think a lot of that might kind of play into Enten's more flashier abilities or developments later on. I get what you're saying, but I think we haven't seen Enten go off in a minute, and that's why.
And I mentioned this before, but I do think that like the point of Enten is to basically be able to, I think the point of Enten is to be able to fight in public or fight in like the current state of the world against other enchanted blades without like, basically he gave Chihiro the perfect tool to fight against other enchanted blade swordsmen or someone
they're
who's
not nukes.
like, and because if he did create,
that's not a nuke.
If the seventh blade was just another enchanted blade, it would just be a cycle of the like constant like struggle, the constant issue with like the issue with the blades. But
that's a good point, bro.
Like he's given him the perfect tool to protect himself and combat the other enchanted blades in a more like modern time. I don't want to say modern time because the war was like 18 years ago, but like in the sense of the landscape of where they're fighting. he's like Akka. I think Akka, that my big thing is with Akka is that he's, his true realm basically is going to harness, like, he's going to get bits and pieces of every blade, and that'll help him like fight the final villain who's using the Magatsumi. So instead of like the Magatsumi, which is like the big dog, the OP blade, 200,000 killed, like doing damage. Now Chihiro's gonna have the power of Anten plus the other 5 enchanted blades, basically 6 enchanted blades worth of power in one sword to rival the Magatsumi, and whoever's gonna wield it at the end. And I think that's the what they might be playing at.
Yeah, no, I mean that would definitely be insane. Really.
Yeah,
but I think like regardless, like Anten is just built to, like you said, really just counter the other blades, and we might have not seen, or at least that's my little theory right now, because we saw it with Sojo, and even though that was kind of that was obviously like he used his own blade like as a conduit to absorb the lightning. I think there's a good chance that was kind of like a bit of subtle foreshadowing to what you're saying, like whether it's absorbing the abilities of the other blades or not. Like Kunishige would most definitely build this blade to be able to counter the other blades he made, and once again, the idea of it being able to be used without collateral damage just really plays into that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see kind of Chihiro be able to develop Anten and find those counters to whether it be Tobimune, whether it be Kumayuri or Kumayuri, or just at the end against the Magatsumi.
I wonder.
I have that belief.
I wonder how Chihiro could use Akka against like Kumayuri and Tobimune. Like, how could he like absorb their power? Like, imagine if Chihiro got like a Suzaku, like if he could like somehow absorb a Suzaku, like give himself a way to heal later on. Cause that boy's always he's always banged up.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I wouldn't be like, Akka might just be once again that one, the one ability that it isn't flashy, but it's broken as hell because it can just snatch bits of other abilities.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how he plays on Enten's like advancement through the rest of the series. Because I mean, this is a big like eye opener. Because like when you think about like the lightning and all that, Sojo's blade, it was, if you can outspeed it, it's not as, it's still that's a fucking powerful ass sword, obviously, but it made sense within reason for how like, Chihiro just locked in harder. But we didn't get to see like the Magatsumi, we didn't get to see a whole lot of. Like, this is really like Chihiro's second actual battle with like an enchanted blade. Like, it was just a taste of like Magatsumi at first to show like it was more of like setting the tone for just how evil that blade was, or like the corruption of it, more so than like the power set. Like we'll get more about that, but I don't know, it'd be interesting to see. I don't really have too much more to say, but I mean, that last panel goes stupid hard.
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah. Yeah. I guess the last thing I'll really say in terms of all this is the more we keep kind of get deeper in the story and more abilities and more blades keep getting revealed, we're definitely going to get those answers, right? You and me spent a lot of time talking before we started recording about like the true realm and what exactly is going on there. The fact that limits are essentially just dictated by the wielder just opens the range for Hokuzono to do literally whatever he wants. And we entertained the idea about like the fact that he might not still have it all cooked up, but I think that's what I'm looking forward to in terms of now with the development and more abilities of the enchanted blades being revealed, and things like play, things like Suzaku. Like these aren't just, you know, like we were talking about with Anten. These aren't just practical abilities. And what we saw again with Samura with the wings, these are like huge like things that could have big ramifications in how we perceive the power system. And I wouldn't be surprised if like 50 chapters from now or 20 chapters from now we're looking at this power system just in a completely different light, because we still don't know the specifics of Datenseki. We still don't know. Well, we know Kunishige had special eyes that allowed him to be able to, you know, wield or forge the enchanted blades. But essentially, there's still so much about spirit energy and the enchanted blades that we still don't know. And I'm just really looking forward to how Hogazono decides to cook that up in a way that allows this to thrive as a battle shonen, you know, for fights. Because I think right now one of my favorite things of this chapter, or in theory, is like teleportation and telekinesis are kind of like two of my favorite abilities in fiction in general. And I've always thought that it would be like an interesting matchup, and the fact that we're seeing it like in this story play out, whether we get a lot of it or not, is just interesting for me personally, right? So yeah, man, I'm here, I'm sat. I'm enjoying this story, and I think this chapter really keeps the hot streak that I was talking about last episode in terms of you know, Hokazono cooking.
Facts. And you know, this he's really, the hot streak is kind of crazy, like at least for us anyway. I know we both been stoked on it. We talked about, there's some I want to mention, but basically here, you know, the objects, how it gives him the freedom to like freely control objects. Who knows like what Hirohiko, like, you know, I mentioned earlier in the episode, what else he might be, you know, freely controlling. He might have like things like safeguards prepared for worst case scenario. So it'd be interesting to see where that plays out. Overall, I
agree, almost definitely.
Yeah, banger chapter. Still got a lot. Toto's hilarious. He's like, go hide, Toto. And she's like, okay, like where's she hiding at? You know, it's not a safe spot anywhere inside that hotel.
Yeah, she's not even with Kaguri.
Yeah,
she's like, nah, not that dude.
She probably like got the fuck. She just teleported somewhere far away. But the that hotel got to come down sooner or later. We'll see how many more chapters.
And so does Samura.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna put another chapter count, even though I think he is gonna die in 2 chapters.
I love it.
Yeah, fuck him. Nah, that'll do it for me.
Yeah, man, I've said all I wanted to say, really. I appreciate everybody for, again, tuning in.
Y'all know the drill. Like, subscribe. Appreciate y'all. See y'all next week. Peace.
Peace.